Selamat siang, Dokter Ika.
Halo, halo, halo.
Siang, Dokter. Saya oper host ke dokter ya.
Sebentar, halo, Mbak. Oh, backsound ya? Apa? Bantu ya?
Ada apa?
Bentar, Mbak.
Ah, siap.
Halo,
Ya,
jelas ya?
jelas Bu, tapi agak menggema sedikit.
Kalau, sebentar. Halo, host Bu Sandra.
Iya, halo.
Bisa dengar suara saya nggak?
Sudah, dengan jelas.
Nggak menggema ya?
Enggak, aman ini Bu.
Oke, makasih.
Ya, ini saya oper hostnya kemana ya Ibu?
Berarti yang hostnya ini siapa, Mas Roy? Jangan saya ya. Suaranya kalau masuk kedengeran kenceng nggak di sana?
Di saya
Coba Ibu
kencang sih.
ngomong. Ibu ngomong, ke dokter ngomong.
Halo, selamat siang. Tes 1 2.
Dari
Tes 1 2 3 4 5. Heeh. Oh, oke. Ya, ini saya matiin sih. Nah, Pak Adi mau pakai ini juga bisa.
kok bisa ngomong gitu ya?
Hah?
Kok suaranya itu? Padahal sudah pakai ini.
Halo 1 2.
Oh ya, masih panjang. Testing, testing. Oh, nggak mau, Ibu harus matiin.
Enggak, saya matiin. Pak Adi yang pakai ini soalnya. Jadi Pak Adi mendingan pakai ini aja.
Oh, oke,
Jadi
oke.
di mute aja.
Itu di mute aja. Testing, good afternoon everyone. Oke. Oke.
Saya cuma pengen dengar kalau ada orang dari luar yang dari sana. Hah? Sudah enggak ada. Tempatnya Dokter Jeffman nih. Hah?
Nah, ini dokter Jamal.
Ya nggak apa-apa.
Dokter Jamal di sini.
Nanti untuk yang ngepin poin itu gimana? Oh,
Kita bisa lakukan sekarang sih. Nanti hostnya bisa sih. Tinggal ngechat gini. Oh, tapi saya bukan host.
iya.
Ini kalau saya
Nanti hostnya siapa ini?
Bentar, saya suruh oper ke saya. Sandra, hostnya
Apa?
kasihkan ke saya dulu dong.
Apa?
Iya Pak,
Ngepin
saya
yang
kasih ke Pak
pembicara
Adi ya.
Oke.
Heeh.
Dokter Jamal. Ini pangku aja.
Ayo adik-adik duduknya maju depan. Ntar nggak kelihatan.
Yang maju di depan dapat OVO.
Tulisannya dari Pak Bahar.
Itu baru OVO ya, belum nominalnya.
Iya itu baru.
kameranya di sana.
Oh, webcam ya?
Ya, gitu aja ya. Bisa tergantung kalau misalnya speakernya jangan jauh. Bisa lebih pendek sih. Oh, berarti webcam. Jadi buat webcam aja dinyalain. Terima beres. Kan bukannya menuju. Yang pakai mic aja. Jadi mikrofon bisa dimatikan semua.
Ini kelihatan.
Ini nanti.
Jadi host.
Isi Bapak Ibu, ini saya izin share screen dan sound ya Bapak Ibu agar yang di YouTube tidak kosong.
Hello, Prof. Bram. How are you? Oh, ya, seperti itu ya. Yes. Yeah, okay. Hello, Prof. Bram. How are you? Oh, makasih. Enggak, Prof. Hello, Dr. Jin Hee Han. How are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Prof. Ram.
Hi, Adi. Sorry, I forgot about the background, the Zoom background. Let me set it up first. Almost
Uh,
forgot.
Could you turn on your video so that I can also for Prof. Ram? Oh, hi, Dr. Jin. Who
Yeah,
should we
I'm
call
here.
you?
It's Jin Hee.
Jin Hee. Okay,
Yes.
so Dr. Jin Hee. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So your voice is quite clear. Now,
That's good.
would you mind to try your share screen?
Just a moment. I'm probably this one. Okay, I share
Okay.
the screen.
Yes, we can see it clearly. Thank you, Dr. Jin Hee.
Okay.
Then for Prof. Bram, how are you, Prof. Bram?
Well, thank you, Adi. Just give me a second. I'm still, I have to, I'm still looking for the Zoom background from my files, and I haven't found it yet, but I will. So just give me a second.
Okay, no problem. So yeah.
Found it.
If you see, this webinar is quite interesting because in front of me, there are around 200 students.
Wow, that's a lot.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any camera that can show you how the room is very full with the students, but all of them are the faculty of Ubaya Faculty of Medicine students that reach around 200, and more are coming. So hopefully would be an interesting topic and webinar for them. Program, would you mind to share screen yours?
Sure.
Okay, we can see it clearly. Thank you, Program. Okay. So we will start in 10 menit lagi persis jam 1 atau mau
10 menit lagi aja.
10 menit ya. Okay, we will start in 10 minutes, which would be 1 o'clock sharp. While in Sydney, I think it's already 5 o'clock, right, Prof. Bram? And in Korea, two hours difference, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct. In 3 p.m. Could be.
Okay, we will start 10 minutes. Then now you can have your coffee first. Then we will meet in 10 minutes while we are also preparing and finalizing the room now. See you in 10 minutes, Prof. Bram and Prof. Jin.
Bye.
Okay.
Okay.
Nanti aja.
Karena ini sudah mau mulai semua, Prof. Bram. Nanti saya kembali lagi bisa ngajar.
Iya, ya. Enggak maksudnya.
Apa? thank you for coming to this room, because today we will have a Ubaya Global webinar. This is actually the second part of our Ubaya Global webinar after the Faculty of Psychology. So the Ubaya Global webinar combines various Ubaya faculties to deliver various webinars, and all faculties invite students and also public. And I'm very glad, and the committee are all very glad that all of you are here, because this one is something unique, because it is conducted hybrid. Normally, webinar is online, right? Before I continue, my name is Aditya Jakusuma. I'm the director of the Office of Institutional Cooperation of Ubaya, and I'm the chairperson of this Ubaya Global Webinar 2023. Thank you also to the speakers, Prof. Bram Mariadi, MD, MPH, PhD, SF, HEA, FPHAA from University of Sydney, Western Sydney, Australia. Good afternoon, Prof. Bram. How are you today? Also, thank you for Associate Professor Jin Hee-han, PhD, from the Kangwon National University, Republic of Korea. And we will have another two speakers from Thailand and from the Netherlands, who will talk about an update in translational medicine from bench to bedside and community. But every speaker will talk a bit different subtopic. So please listen to them. And then also not to forget, I also thank you for Prof. Ramdhani. Hello, Prof. Thank you for coming, Prof. Thank you for supporting this event. It is really a great honor for us to have you here. The Dean, Ubaya Faculty of Medicine. Please give applause to him. Also, not to forget the Vice Dean, my partner in crime, Dr. Risma Ikawati. Thank you, Doctor. Also, Dr. Jahman for supporting this webinar. I wish this webinar will be running smoothly and will be successful. And I think, as you are all young generation and those who are in Zoom, before we start, we will do a group photo only for those in Zoom. For the students here, we will do it later, okay? But now we'll do with the speakers in Zoom. Sandra, would you mind to comment us and take a screenshot for all of us here?
Okay, will do, Pak. So, thank you for turning on the camera. I will wait until 5 for all of you in the Zoom to turn your camera on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, some of them are just turning on the camera. I'll take the first page first. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and moving to the second one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, now without further ado, now I give the time for the moderator, Dr. Risma Ikawati, to start the webinar session. Please, Doc.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pak Adi. First of all, I would like to welcome all the speakers and to all the attendees online and also offline. And for your information, that join with us is about 200 medical students of Ubaya. They are here. They want to learn, and then listening to your experience and also the expertise. And I would like to thanks to the speakers for taking your invaluable time to be here and sharing your expertise with us. So my name is Risma Kawati. I'm a molecular microbiologist and also a lecturer in Ubaya Medical Faculty. And I will be guiding you through this webinar for the next 2 hours. For the general rule, the webinar will be delivered in 2 sessions. For each session will be 2 presentations, 20 minutes each, and then followed by the Q&A. And then we would like to ask to the online participant, if you have any questions, you can write it down in the question box, in the chat box. And then please mute yourself during the session. And later on, we also would like to invite the students for giving questions for the interactive Q&A session as well, if time is still allowed. We will start with the first sessions. So as a topic that in today's webinar, we will learn and discuss from the 4 distinguished speakers about the current update in translational medicine and how the integration of the translational medicine into clinical practice and also to the community. Is there any obstacle and how to overcome? So to start the first session, I would like to invite Associate Professor Bram Putra Maryadi, Prof. Bram. He is an Associate Professor in Community Engaged Learning and the Associate Dean for Engagement at the Western Sydney University School of Medicine in Australia. Prof. Bram obtained a medical degree from Indonesia and postgraduate public health degrees in Australia. He has a wide array of experiences from microbiology, public health, and also medical education, with 3 things remain constant: his passion for teaching, his service to marginalized population, and his interest in cross-cultural knowledge translation. And if you remember to all the students that a few months back, we were so fortunate that Prof. Bram gave a visit to our campus here in Ubaya and share his teaching and learning experience with our students and lecturer. And today, Prof. Bram will talk about the challenges in research translations from bench to bedside to community. So without further ado, Prof. Bram, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ika. Good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to first seek permission to share the screen. So the session that I'm going to deliver is going to be on challenges in research translation from bench to bedside and to the community, as pertinent to the topic of today's webinar. I'm going to draw from observation, especially comparing probably the 2 countries between Indonesia and Australia, but also some of the literature on research and knowledge translation. So I would like to start by defining what is it when we talk about research and knowledge translation. What are we talking about? This is just one of the many definitions. You know, this one I got from the WHO. Research or knowledge translation is the synthesis, exchange, and application of knowledge by relevant stakeholders to accelerate the benefits of global and local innovation in strengthening health systems and improving people's health. A very long definition, but looking at other definitions of research and knowledge translation, that's the word cloud. What kind of words do people use when they talk about research translation? As you can see there, we're talking about research and knowledge translation in health, right? So you can see that it's all about research, it's all about knowledge, but it's also about systems, and it's also about applying what we know. It's about synthesizing what we know into practice. And at the end of the day, we want to create benefits. Obviously, that's the aim of the knowledge translation. Now, as you can imagine, this is all very interesting concept and very useful, very strong sort of concept. And the application is going towards the service of humanity. In my presentation, I'm going to explain how sometimes there are problems along the way. And I will end my presentation with some recommendation as how we can overcome those barriers. So when we talk about the bench to bedside to community, which I really like this concept, is basically we are talking about the basic research in medicine, and then we're talking about the clinical research. Usually this is in the clinical setting, either as in the GP clinic or the hospital settings. And then we talk about the rolling out of the knowledge into the community at large. This is usually the role of public health, right? So we're talking about basic medical science here, the bench. We're talking about clinical medicine, bedside. And now we talk about public health, community. Now, I started my career as a microbiologist. So I started from the bench, and then I did my master and PhD in infection control. That's the bedside. And now I am an associate professor in the social determinants of health, which is basically public health. So I've traversed these three parts of medicine. Now, the problem here that we often see, the challenges, there are challenges in translating what we do here in the basic science into the clinical application of it. And then what we do in the clinical application to translate it bigger to the community. But as importantly, there is also a challenge down here that you see the arrow should go both ways. Right? So it's not just let's do research at basic science, then think about the application in clinic, then think about the application in the population, but it should also go the other way around. We should examine what are the problems in the community, what are the diseases, what are the risk factors in the community, and then we design clinical research to solve those issues. And after we do that, and similarly, after we do that, or once we found something in the clinical setting, then we need also to go back to the basic science, right? What is the explanation for the phenomena that we found on the clinical side? And this back arrows here, down here, is something that that unfortunately is often missing. So when we talk about setting up research agenda or coming up with research ideas, it is actually quite rare to try and get ideas from the right side of the picture to the left side of the picture. Normally, it's easy to talk about bench to bedside to community, but we also have to think about from community to bedside to bench, okay? I'm going to put up three challenges oftenly found in this research translation backward and forward. The first one is sometimes we miss translation steps. Now, this is one model from the Knowledge Translation Library, KT library, and they actually break down knowledge translation, KT, into KT1 to KT6. Right? So they say that if you want to make sure that your research, your knowledge is being translated further on, you need to start talking with the people who are the target group of your research, right from when you define the research question and methods. And let's take a moment here to reflect on our own practices. How many biochemists, for example, when they're researching a gene for diabetes, how many of them actually would consult patients with diabetes, patients with lived experiences of diabetes, before they decide, I'm going to research on this? Right? And similarly, there are KT2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, we don't have time to go through every step, but I put the link down there. If you just look up KT1 to KT6 knowledge translation, you can find the full explanation of this model. But basically, it means that every single step of our research, from designing the research question to developing the methods, and then publishing it, and then making decisions, and then contextualizing the findings, making decisions in clinical setting or in public health realm, and then influencing and then feeding back to future research, we need to engage with the target group. So if our research is about clinical practices, then we need to talk to GPs. We need to talk to clinicians, right? And if we miss any of this step, what often happens, and this happens all over the world, what often happens is we just do our research, boom, 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 boom. And then once we publish it, then we start thinking, okay, how can I change practice out of this publication? Well, that's too late because you should have engaged with your target group right from the beginning. Number two is the siloed approach, right? Those who are bench researchers, they don't normally speak much with the clinical researcher, and the clinical researchers normally do not speak very much at all with public health practitioners. Okay, so this siloed approach makes it very difficult if somebody, for example, somebody conducted the research on how a particular algae from the ocean can cure diabetes, for example. And yes, in vitro it works, right? But or in silico it works. But what's then? What's going to be the translation? Are we going to make that all patients in the hospital will eat with diabetes, will eat that algae, for example, will be prescribed that algae? We often don't talk to clinicians before we do our research, like our bench research, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now that hopefully has changed now, hopefully, because as you can see during COVID is incredible because it actually brought all unusual collaborators together. In managing COVID, we actually bring the clinicians, the scientists, and the public health people, even professional bodies and regulatory bodies, health policy makers, even we bring the politicians along with us, okay, to decide how we can manage the pandemic. So hopefully this is absolutely the step to the right direction, and we need to keep working like this. Hopefully we do not have any more pandemics after this, but we need to work together as we have been working together during the COVID pandemic to break the silos. The last challenge is about evidence-based medicine, or here I call evidence-based what exactly? And there are some subtopics in this, okay? So we all know the cycle for evidence-based medicine, and one of the biggest problems in research translation, why these things are not working, or even the research itself are not working, is because of problems in evidence-based medicine. I want to start with the first two. Do we actually practice evidence-based medicine, or as very well known in Indonesia, are we practicing testimony-based medicine rather than evidence-based medicine? And the crux of this issue is the second point, is the deficient understanding of research methods, including logical fallacies. We don't realize that just because somebody were to drink something when they got a disease and then suddenly they get better, that means this must be the cure. That's a logical fallacy, but many scientists, unfortunately, scientists, clinicians, public health people, policymakers, they don't realize that because their understanding of research methods are thin. And then, and also attached to that is the deficient understanding of ethical conduct. I'm going to give you some examples here. Those of you from Indonesia would know some of this very, very well, okay? So first, testimony-based medicine. We all know this thing called the thunderstone, going back a few years, okay? So a little boy, you know, finding this stone and it can cure people. Well, for many clinicians, say, oh, that's rubbish, you know, like because it's just a little boy in the village, you know, the boy made a lot of money from this thunderstone, but he said, no, obviously that's not evidence-based. That's not that difficult to spot, right? But when somebody with a PhD came up with this divine cigarette, so the smoke can enter the skin and trap what's the word? Some toxins and everything from the body. Or when there is a magnetic, wearable magnetic, clothing, jacket, pants, and helmet, and everything that they say can cure cancer, then somehow people say this must be different. This must be different from the thunderstone because these people have PhDs, right? They're scientists. Surely they know what they're doing, right? The fact that these divine cigarettes and anti-cancer jacket had nil peer-reviewed publication completely skip everybody's mind. They have PhDs. Surely they know what to do. And then, getting worse, when then a doctor came up with the so-called brainwash therapy. Now, not only that this person has a PhD, they're actually a doctor. Surely they know what they're doing. Surely this is evidence-based. Okay, not always like that the case, unfortunately. And then the last one, of course, is the most recent. When a ministry produced a preventative measure for COVID, right? And then people might think, oh, this is from the ministry. Surely they're doing the right thing. Surely they have done their homework. Surely they have tested and proven this, right? Whereas, in fact, if you look at these 5 innovation, quote unquote, you will see the common theme here. All we have is not clinical evidence. All we have is testimonies. And we never hear testimonies, it's never publicized testimonies from people who failed, who didn't get well, who actually got worse after undergoing all these methods. We never heard about that, right? Yet the masses, the community, and even some clinicians swear by this innovation. That's one of the biggest challenges in translating research into practice, that we actually adopting practices that are not based on evidence. The next step is non-evidence-based policy making. So we're taking it to the community now in making policies. And related to this is extraneous influences, not from the scientific community. This is probably from external, not from the health authorities. This is actually external. And these influences or forces are quite relentless at times and quite ruthless. I'm going to show you a couple of examples on this. Okay, first of all, we know how dangerous smoking is. Okay, one of the evidence-based measure to reduce smoking is what we call plain packaging. Now, this is the plain packaging in Uruguay. Okay, as you can see, the health message is big. There is no branding. The branding is just in writing. The color is so plain. And the pictures of diseases are very, very big. There's actually, in Australia, the picture is bigger than this. The name of the brand is smaller than this. Look what we have in Indonesia. Yes, we do have warning, okay, but we don't do plain packaging. The brands are still there. And the warning is so small, you need a magnifying glass to read them. And the pictures actually are showing how enjoyable smoking is, even though it says warning. But the disease is so small. Yes, there are some skulls there, but in fact, what you see there is promoting people smoke, right? So this is completely against the evidence on plain packaging. Okay, and even this one, isn't that amazing? The label is put so well that it actually covered the skeleton. So all you see is somebody who's smoking. Okay. Now, why is it so difficult? Because in Indonesia, every time we talk, the public health people and the clinicians, actually, respiratory clinician experts, talk about reducing smoking, then everybody started screaming about the income that we get from the tax. People, what's going to happen with the poor tobacco farmers and everything. There have been evidence. There have been evidence that the state is actually going to benefit if we reduce smoking. This has been proven in so many countries, including countries that look like that are similar with Indonesia. We're not talking rich countries. We're actually talking about, like middle income countries like Indonesia. Okay, we will get a net benefit. Now, this book is part of the attempt to debunk the myths, to give evidence that you don't need to worry about the loss of taxes. You don't need to worry what happens with the tobacco farmers. They will adapt and they will actually have better income. If you think that the cigarette companies are giving them good price for their tobacco, you are fooled, because they did not receive that much money. Okay, they are being used by the tobacco companies, right? And so I was part of the team to translate this book, but you will never see this book in the bookshop. Because every time we put this on the shelf of Gramedia, the very next day, this book disappeared from the bookshop. Why? Because the secret companies bought all the copies. They want to make sure that nobody will ever read this evidence. Speaking about being relentless, okay, we try to translate knowledge into practice, and look what happened. Now, what about this one? Okay, when Vaksin Nusantara first came on, I was very excited. I was paying so much attention to how it was debated, because the debate at the beginning was incredibly good example of research translation, of knowledge translation. Okay, so we were talking about the how it works and how the design and everything like that. But very, very quickly, the debates shifted. Suddenly, if you do not support Vaksin Nusantara, you are not a good Indonesian citizen. You are a bad citizen because you're not proud of your country. Well, hang on a second. We're talking about a medical innovation here, which is amazing. But why are we talking about you are a bad citizen unless you support this work? So very clearly, the debate shifted into politics, into power play. And that's when I decided to, okay, you know what? I'm not going to pay any attention to this anymore, because the knowledge translation has been left behind. Suddenly it becomes a political issue. Suddenly it becomes a power struggle. And I'm sorry, I have patients to look after. I have medical students to teach. I don't have time for this. Okay, such a shame. But like I said, it's ruthless. Okay, if you don't support this, you're a bad Indonesian. That's ruthless, ruthless. Okay. Then the last one is a psychic reason. Sometimes one of the psychic reason is a concept by Garrett Morgan, you know, when they say that people become trapped in ways of thinking. Okay, so I had an experience of trying to translate sex education models into the Indonesian cultural context, right? Yet I was faced by this strong resistance when people say, we are Eastern people, we don't do Western things. Our kids do not have sex because we are religious community. Well, we know the reality of that, right? We know religion does not stop people from having extramarital sex. That's the fact, okay? And it's very well supported by evidence. But sometimes this is just us. We're not going to change. That's the psychic reason. So in conclusion, challenges to research translation are strong and pervasive, but you know what? We must not give up. We must never, ever, ever give up. It's very tempting to be safe, business as usual, stay in the silos, play it safe, keep your job, sell your soul, okay? But we can do the right thing. We can stand up. We can translate knowledge so that we can stand for the health and safety of our patients, our communities. How do we do that? We have to plan research translation right from the beginning, not at the end. We have to break the silos. We have to start by medical students, health professional students, teaching very strongly about research methods. We need to step, and then for practicing clinicians and researchers, we have to do continuing professional development on research translation. That's what we have in Western Sydney University. We need to step outside our comfort zone. We have to embark on advocacy. If government policy is not evidence-based, we have to call it out. We said, hang on a second, that is not evidence-based. We need to educate the public and each other. And always remember, we're doing this because we are called to save human lives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Bram, for very, very interesting topics. And we continue to the second speaker, Professor Jin Hee Han. I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrect. Maybe you can tell me how to pronounce it well. I would like to introduce Prof. Jin Hee Han. He's assistant professor from Department Medical Environmental Biology and Tropical Medicine, School of Medicine, Gangwon National University, Republic of Korea. Prof. Jin Hee Han received his PhD in parasitology in KNU and continued his postdoctoral training in microbiology and immunology in New Zealand. And his research interest in malarial parasite, and I saw his recent publications by using 3D tomographic techniques for ring stage classification of malaria parasites. So today, Prof. Jin Hee Han will talk about emerging natural infections of zoonotic malaria, new threatening and new opportunities. So Prof. Jin Hee Han, time is yours.
Okay, thank you for introduction. And the pronunciation is perfect. You're like just like a Korean.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's perfect. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me as a speaker of this wonderful webinar. I'm Jin Han, who's studying about the malaria. Especially my major topic is identification of malaria invasion mechanism, where today I'm going to talk about the zoonotic malaria. I reckon that many people are not familiar about this zoonotic malaria. Okay, today let's talk about this. How much they are risky in the human beings and how we can use it for future research. So this topic we're starting from the understanding of the field community side and the problem dragged to the bench. Okay. The first part is the background of the zoonotic malaria, a threatening infectious disease. So if I simply summarize about the malaria is a human life-threatening disease caused by Plasmodium species. This is a protozoan parasite that are transmitted to human through the bite of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. So here is the Anopheles mosquitoes. The WHO annually reported the prevalence of malaria in the world. In 2021, there has 247 million cases occurred, and within that, 619,000 patient deaths by malaria infection. It looks huge population, but someone cannot feel how much serious problem of this. If I change the word, maybe you can think it more. Every 1 second, approximately 8 persons got malaria in 2021. So can you guess? I have 20-minute presentation in this section. So how many persons get the malaria within this time? Yes, that is over than 9,600 persons. And the death rate, every 50 seconds, 1 person die because of the malaria infection. So you can feel more, this is a really serious situation now. So from end of 2019, the malaria cases will increase rapidly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Recently, still we're suffering to overcome COVID-19. And this COVID-19 also affects malaria infection rate and malaria death rate in the world. I searched the Indonesia situation and prepared this small graph. This graph indicates that Indonesia also increased the malaria incidence due to COVID-19 like this. Actually, in South Korea, also same pattern. The interestingly, in this graph show in this black color, other species indicate other species. It could be including the Plasmodium knowledzi infection affected this steep rising. So let's see what is the Plasmodium knowledzi. We knew that only 5 Plasmodium species can infect a human, but is it really true? That is, I don't think so. The Plasmodium exists approximately 250 species in the world. But actually, the Plasmodium species is very sensitive to select a host. For example, human malaria is not able to infect another vertebrate. For example, rodent malaria cannot infect a human. And the other, avian malaria or wizard malaria cannot infect a human. But how about the monkey malaria? Everybody will learn the great ape genome is quite similar here. For example, the chimpanzee has only 1% difference in the genome. And also, the primate monkey show very similar gene sequence with the human. So it might be the monkey malaria species are able to infect a human by chance or by just naturally. In the left side, I show the phylogenetic tree of the primate malaria. The red color indicate including the Vivax, malariae, ovale, and falciparum is well known for human malaria species. But just recently, there has increased in the zoonotic malaria natural infection cases, especially in Southeast Asia. In 2014, the cynomolgi, which old world monkey is the natural host, but it is covered in human. Also, the Felidae and Inui discovered in human just recently in 2021. In case of this nullesi, Plasmodium nullesi, it discovered in human more earlier in 2004, and nowadays nullesi is recognized the 5th human malaria species, especially in Southeast Asia. Actually, there has New World monkey malaria species also discovered in human in southern part of America, nearby the Amazon area. That is simium. Simium is here and Brazilianum is here. The New World has different evolutionary history of monkey as well as Plasmodium species also. From this fact, the genotype malaria is not accidentally invaded human, it adapted to human by evolution. So now is time to focus the genotype malaria before too late. About the genotype malaria, one big question is that, is monkey malaria misdiagnosed in the past or just recently adapted in human? My opinion is misdiagnosed because look at this parasite morphology. We are well known about the vivax malaria, this vivax, which is a human malaria, and recently discovered in human, these two, simium and cynomolgi, genotype malaria. When we diagnose malaria using the microscope, we can differentiate species based on the species-specific morphological features. The vivax show this kind of amoeboid form from the trophozoid stage, and we can observe this brownish color spinodot. So if we can see these specific features, we will diagnose as a vivax. But can you differentiate with this simium and cynomolgi by morphology? Almost impossible. And there has quite similar, actually same morphological features appear. This is true. Even the experts for microscope diagnosis in the field, they are just diagnosed as a vivax. Even the patient got the simium or cynomolgi. Still, we don't know, but I reckon that the genotype malaria is slowly adapted in human and just recently discovered it according to diagnosis method development. So the next question about genotype malaria. Is genotype malaria human life threatening? Yes, I'm sure. Yes, it is. It had many reports for cerebral malaria cases, like falciparum malaria in nullesi. But still, we don't know exact mechanism of this pathology caused by nullesi. Some reports said the deadest parasite falciparum killed children age that is under the 5 years old, but the nullesi killed the adult. So let's see this post-mortem study of nullesi patient brain. We can see a lot of hemorrhagic region in here in the brain. The reason why we need to focus genotype malaria to prevent now and future unknown risk in human health. And one systematic review paper showed nullesi incidence in Sabah, Malaysia, in 2010 to 2017. In this graph, show traditional human malaria species that including falciparum and vivax decrease, but nullesi infection increasing quickly. In total, 7,750 nullesi cases are occurred and 19% died because of nullesi infection. The mortality rate is 0.24%. The actually same as deadest parasite falciparum. This Sabah area is nearby the Indonesia. Actually, there is a border with the Indonesia. Thus, I'm sure the Indonesia also has genotype malaria, but just not clearly discovered yet. So the lack of the genotype malaria information will make serious problem in near futures. In the summary of the first part is simple, just first one, we are just beginning to recognize genotype malaria. And second, we do not know exact risk of genotype malaria. And in this slide, I'm showing the map of the drug-resistant malaria spreading history. So we can substitute to genotype malaria in this map. Okay, the second chapter is a new opportunity for future malaria research. We can't stop to occur genotype malaria in the nature. However, at least we can use it as an experimental tool. Thus, I talk about the bench side work in this section. Let's see how we use this genotype malaria species for understanding of the human malaria. The in vitro culture system is very important to research about malaria. Plasmodium vivax has highest morbidity in the world, but unfortunately, vivax malaria cannot culture. There has few reasons that the vivax prefer to invade young erythrocyte, we call it reticulocyte. Thus, it is really difficult to get the host cell source. Even we supply the young erythrocyte, the vivax not grow well in the laboratory. We don't know the exact reason still. But anyway, still have no in vitro culture system in vivax. If we can culture this parasite, we can get bulk of insights about the molecular biology or physiology and drug screening, and so on. We can do many work. Thus, to overcome this hurdle, for understanding of vivax malaria, many researchers trying to culture sister species. In 2016, the Plasmodium knowledge successfully adapted in vitro culture system in the human blood. And nowadays, we're easy to use this cultured parasite, and genomic information also we can use for the understanding of the vivax malaria biology. And more recent, in 2019, Plasmodium cynomolgi successfully developed in vitro culture system. But the cynomolgi only can culture in the monkey blood, not in the human blood. So still we struggle to make a human blood adapted strain because the cynomolgi genome is much similar with the vivax. Okay, so let's talk about the invasion biology, how we can use primate malaria to understand vivax malaria based on the molecular biology techniques. So now we can culture the cynomolgi and knowledge. These parasites are primate malaria parasites that's similar with the human malaria vivax. Thus, they are express similar protein, including this kind of DBP and RBPs. These DBPs and RBP, those proteins are essential to select the host and invade to the host cell. So if we characterize and compare these protein functions, we can know the exact amino acid residue where we need to targeting on vaccine. Thus, we want to know what is the difference in DBP among the species and how they can select monkey or human as a host. Especially this DBP, here is the DBP. DBP, the full name is Duffy binding protein, a most essential molecule to invade to host cell in primate malaria, including vivax also. So experimentally, if we block the DBP and its receptor we call DARC, this DARC interaction, if we block, the parasite totally cannot invade. So this is very nice target to develop the malaria vaccine. Of course, already trying to make DBP vaccine and test it in clinical trial in phase 1B in the field. But the actual protection rate show below than 40% because of the natural genetic variation of DBP protein. Thus, we need to narrow down more. We have to find the specific amino acid which are involved essential for selection of the host DARC to find the vaccine targeting residue. Here, this amino acid sequence alignment result shows the similarity of DBP among the species. So here is vivax DBP and knowledge DBP and two kinds of cynomolgi DBPs here. In this alignment, especially cysteines are highlighted by the yellow color. The cysteines are well conserved, the meaning that 3D structure will be similar in this structure, and also the function will be similar. So in vivax, DBP function is well known to interact with the human DARC, and this interaction is essential for parasite invasion. Let's see the DARC. The DARC, the partner, this DARC exists two types in the human and also two types of monkey. And this black box indicates the DBP interaction site in the DARC. In this box, monkey DARC isoform B at position 23, one glutamic acid was deleted. It could be affect interaction of DBP in the nature. So let's see the experiment results shortly. The interaction study results show specific interaction pattern in DBP and DARC. In the figure A is the co-IP experiment. The results show that Bibox DBP is well interact with Homo sapiens as a human DRC, well interact with the human DRC. If in the illusion lane, I marked by E, this E, show double band, there is interaction. And this band strengths indicate the binding strength. So Cynomolgi DBP1 show interact with both of monkey and human. So in scientifically, the Cynomolgi can select human and monkey both over as a host. And Cynomolgi DBP2 was not interact with the DBP, but this ligand protein could interact with another unknown receptor. We confirmed that by erythrocyte binding assay. So that means this DBP2 can bind with erythrocyte, but we still don't know, just don't know the receptor. And the knowledge DBP alpha also show interaction in monkey, and human interaction both. And this one is negative control. It could be not bind with the DRC. Okay. And the figure B is an octet analysis. This graph indicates DBP and DRC interaction also, and we can calculate the binding affinity. The PBDBP with human DRC calculated 7.7 KD value and more than double time higher in monkey DRCs. So lower KD value indicate the more strong binding affinity. And in knowledge similar KD value were calculated in the human and monkey, approximately 20 nanomole. And if we see the graph pattern, the knowledge it should quickly increase the graph and quickly decrease the graph. But in Bibox, it slowly increase the graph and slowly decrease the graph. Because the knowledge DBP interaction pattern is one-to-one molecular binding, but Bibox DBP is complex on dimer binding. Thus, graph pattern should slowly increase and slowly decrease. So anyway, the knowledge and Bibox DBP, the binding pattern is different. How about the Cynomolgi DBP1? Shows same graph pattern with the Bibox. That means this result indicates that the Cynomolgi also make a dimer binding with the DLC. And the binding affinity it shows in threefold higher in the monkey DLC than human DLC. So from this result, we can conclude that the Bibox prefer to select the human erythrocyte as a host cell, and knowledge show equal preference, and Cynomolgi much adapted to monkey erythrocyte. So from the result, what we can interpret, as you know, the Bibox adapted in human in nature, and Cynomolgi even can invade humans, still much adapted to the monkey. And knowledge is equally select human and monkey as a host. From this knowledge, we can identify important amino acid residue for selecting the host. So this is a 3D structure of DBP, and I marked here with the orange color amino acid indicate knowledge and Cynomolgi mutation. Thus, this mutation, orange color mutation, is related to select a monkey as a host. And red color mutation only mutated in the Cynomolgi position at 281 binding to isoleucine is most essential amino acid to select monkey as a natural host. And only knowledge mutation showing by this yellow color background, this amino acid is important to form single or dimer binding pattern. Based on the ligand comparison among the species, we can know sweet spot to make vaccine. If we need to design the Bibox malaria vaccine to protect humans, we need to block position in here, 281 binding. This is essential to select a human. So this position is most critical residue for selection and invasion to the humans. So additionally, if we expand more primate malaria species, DVP, and all species of the monkey DARC, even we can know host of adaptation history of the primate malaria, including human malaria also. So the the malaria research is not easy actually. So there has a lot of hurdle actually. So we work together with international partners. Here is my collaborating in the world. I hope here the Surabaya University will be spotted here in the future. Okay, thank you for your attention. I know this molecular biology relating the malaria invasion is really difficult to understand. So if you have any question, please contact me. Terima kasih.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Now we are going to the Q&A session. Is there any questions from the participant online? But I would like to invite also the students. I think they have so many questions to be asked. Who wants to start? Okay. Maybe we just do interactive Q&A.
Okay. Okay. Good evening. My name is Brian Krista Pradana, and I have a question for Prof. Jin Hee Han, because one thing actually intrigues me about what you said about COVID-19 increased the amount of malaria infections. So I want to ask about why does COVID-19 increase the amount of malaria infections? And are there any other diseases that can increase the amount of malaria infections too? That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Prof. Jihan, maybe you can answer the questions. Right.
Sorry, my speaker is muted, so please ask again. Sorry.
Okay. My name is Brian Krista Pradana, and I want to ask you about. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm intrigued about what you said about COVID-19 increased the amount of malaria infections in Indonesia too. And my question is, why does COVID-19 increase the amount of malaria infection? And are there any other diseases that can increase the amount of malaria infections too? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Yes, not even the malaria, all kind of infection disease increase the infection rate, not only Indonesia, also in the world, all of the world, because many countries just concentrate to treat of the COVID-19 and just neglect other infectious disease. That is why especially even the WHO in the report, they write down about because of the COVID-19, they are just all the efforts to treat COVID-19, the malaria treatment and prevention program, all the budget was decreased. That is why the malaria, the infection rate is increased. But I think not only malaria situation, another helminths, parasitic disease also will be increased. The almost infection disease is increased in last 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Okay, to Jeremy.
Test. Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy, and good afternoon. My name is Jeremy, and I have a question in regards to the first topic about the challenges in research and relation from beds to bedside to community. I would like to ask about the challenges because previously, Professor Abraham, you have said there were 3 challenges that causes to be a problem in the translation about research and knowledge But if I may say, is it because the main problem, the one like the root cause of this all, is it because there's a problem in the system of education that teaches about the knowledge that we have? Because again, because the silent approach regarding the researcher regarding talks with the patient and etc. etc. Does this not imply that the real problem does not lie in the other aspect of the people itself, but in the education system? Because supposedly, because if they were taught from the beginning to be much more open, especially talk to the public about the research they want to do with other practitioner to gain more insight and more knowledge, will not actually make the problem resolve itself. And also because of the first question about questions and methods, if we actually have maybe a better education system, of course, this is not an insult or an offense toward the education systems and the workers there, but maybe we can improve the education system. Will this actually solve the problem on its own? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your question. It's very interesting. Short answer, no. Okay, that's a short answer. Look, education of health professionals, especially in research methods and research translation, is definitely something very, very important. Okay, and just thinking about the Indonesian medical education system, and not just medical education, actually health professional education, there are certainly elements of that could be strengthened, and we need to strengthen that. Okay, and this is not just about creating a better curriculum, but this is also talking about the system, the higher education system, like how the curriculum is designed for research skills, for example, or research methodology. Because I remember when I was a student, when I was a very, very long time ago, the lectures on research methodology were mainly focused on what is the taxonomy of research methods, right? Is it experimental? Is it observation? Is it this? Is it that? Is it that? But the key parts like ethics, for example, that was hardly ever mentioned. Okay, and so 40 years down the track, we've seen these experts, like doing all this research and so-called research, quote unquote, which if you look at it from the ethical point of view, it's like a nightmare, right? It's so scary that people are allowed to experiment on humans in that fashion. So definitely improving education is important, but that's not all. Right? Comparing Indonesia with Australia, for example, if you go to a general practitioner in Australia and ask for antibiotic prescription for a viral infection, they cannot actually do that because the system is designed. If a doctor prescribe
pada tahun 2008 hasil studi mengenai hyperglycemia dan
Sorry, thank you. If a doctor prescribes antibiotic for a viral infection, they will be taken into account. They have to explain what they're doing. In Indonesia, we know it doesn't happen. In Australia, if the justice system is such that you can sue a doctor if they apply treatment or something that is not evidence-based and it ends up endangering or having a negative impact on you. And if, as it turned out, it's proven that the treatment is not evidence-based, then they can really get into trouble. They can, get fined and everything like that. In Indonesia, as I mentioned, some of those non-evidence-based approaches, there have been victims of that. There have been patients, who didn't get well, didn't get better. They actually got worse. Some of them actually died. But these people did not have that recourse to the justice system to sue the invention because of the cultural. We're not as a litigious community in generally speaking. So education in itself is not enough. Education has to be supported with protocols, with policy, just to make sure that we're only doing the best out of the research and knowledge translation, that everything that we do in medicine and health and public, including public health, are activities that have very sound scientific base. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bram, Professor Jihan. We still have 1 minute left before we going to the second session. But I still have, one more question. One, okay.
Okay, so my name is Benedicto Matthew, and I'm going to ask a question for Professor Jin Hee Han. So I'm interested in why are the new types of malaria is more dangerous than the older ones? Because don't we already have many sorts of drugs that can treat malaria, or are there any certain differences in the new types that hence creating things like drug resistance and or difference in the reproductions, hence making it harder to treat? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Yes. Yeah, just recently we discovered the genetic malaria, so we still don't know the sensitivity in the drug. Of course, they can cure by the traditional drug like a chloroquine or artemisinin. It works well, but we don't know exact dose of this drug because nobody tested yet. And why the genetic malaria is harmful to the human? Because actually we don't know exact risk, how they kill the person. We don't know exact mechanism also. But the traditional malaria, the 4 kind of malaria, already well adapted to human. So parasite have to be survive in the host. So host have to be alive. But genetic malaria, the definitive host is not the human, it's monkey. So if that kind of thing in the parasite, accidentally the parasite can kill the host because that host is not the definitive host. That is why we don't know that risk. And the drug resistance either, we don't know. Nobody studied it yet. So even the drug sensitivity, we don't know. But we can treat with the traditional drug. Yes. That is my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we are at the end of the first session. I would like to thank Professor Bram and Professor Jin Hee Han. But before, I would like to wrap up the presentation. So despite the so many challenges in implementation of the translational medicine, we have to still break down the walls, and then we need to collaborate in order to, for the sake of the patient and for the quality of life. And the most important is education and education. We have to educate everyone who are actually involved in the health system. And then so from Professor Jin Hee Han, we actually, from you that we learned that malaria problem is like a never ending problem. Actually, now we see even something else come up, but and also with the COVID-19, but still there is a potential to for the future research in malarial field, I believe. Thank you very much for Professor Bram Mariadi and also Prof. Ji Hee Han. I hope we have more time to discuss maybe in the next future meeting. Thank you very much and good afternoon. We will start with the second session. Give a round of applause. Okay, for the second sessions, I would like to, hello, Professor Yutana.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. And is Professor Yan Nawan is already here? Already? Hello, Yan Nawan, are you there? Okay, I think we will start with the second session of the webinar. The first speaker for the second session is Associate Professor Yutana Srinul Prasar. He is from Department of Immunology, Faculty of Medicine, Sri Raj Hospital, Mahidol University in Thailand. I learned it from Dr. Kevin. That's Ajarn Yutana. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah.
You are an associate professor in immunology, and he obtained his medical doctor and PhD degree in Thailand and continued as postdoctoral training in Switzerland. And during his academic career, Ajahn Yutana focused in drug delivery, drug allergy, and also in clinical immunology. And this afternoon, Professor Yutana will share about the clinical utility of in vitro tests for protection and identification of culprit drugs in severe cutaneous drug hypersensitivity. Ajahn Yutana, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Just a moment. I have to share screen. Okay. Okay. For my part is how to translate the clinical the bench working to the clinical practice. As you know that the drug allergy is not occur every day for the whole people, but someday it can occur one case, two case, and actually the incident is not high when compared to the other the infectious non-infectious disease. But once it occur, it can occur with severity with the severity that may cause mortality and death is in most people. So how can we know about that? Okay, so let me talk about this. The outline of my talk today is around the definition and the utility of in vitro test for susceptible to predict the case and the utility of the in vitro test for the culprit drug identification. And firstly, we have to differentiate between the adverse drug reaction and the drug hypersensitivity. Adverse drug reaction is definition by the WHO. That is the response to any medication that is non-noxious and unintended, and which can occur at dose that's normally used in human. For sure that this is a dose and is a drug that we can use every day, but one day it can make something side effect. And it have the classification of the adverse drug reaction by the Rowling and Thompson, but actually this classification is defined for a long period. But anyhow, we still use that. It divides into type A and type B, or some people also use the other classification by Will and Brown, and how they classify type A to H and U. But today we will focus on the Rowling and Thompson's classification. This classification is defined as type A. The type A is quite normal that we can see in every people that receive the drug, and up to 80% of all adverse drug reaction it can be predictable and dose dependent. And this is normally we say that it is a side effect of that medication. Like you had some gastrointestinal bleeding by the NSAIDs, you say something like that, or some medication like statin that it may have some side effect of the muscle degeneration, something like that. That's it. We know that, and we have the information about that. However, in the type B, it's around nearly 20% of the adverse drug reaction. It is unpredictable and is dose independent. They can occur in susceptible individual. So that we don't know which one, who is the susceptible people. That's it. We have to clarify and investigate. And this can occur by immune mediated and non-immune mediated. And non-immune mediated can be some unknown factor. But the immune-mediated, we still know about how this occur by the immune mediation that we define as a drug allergy or drug hypersensitivity. So in this term, is we have to memorize that the immune mediation of the drug hypersensitivity, it will occur once the drug that you ever export will be re-exported again and drive the immune response by the memorable immune response to against the drug. And the side effects or the inflammation, this may cause the tissue damage or the organ damage. Anyhow, previously that we know that normally the immune reaction, it will occur once you re-exposure the drug again, it will release the memorable immune response, it will attack. Anyhow, this paradigm is shift again. That is some drug that you never exposed before, but it can cause the disease and it can cause the drug hypersensitivity because of they have some individual susceptibility. That's it. I will show you next which one. Or you can bypass the drug exposure before by other synbiotics. Like you can obtain some antibiotic that they use in the stock, in the pork, in the chicken, in the cows culture that is made pass through to you by bypassing drug. Okay, for the drug hypersensitivity, that I'm just only touch a bit to remind you that the hypersensitivity is divided into 4 types. Type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. Type 1 that you already know that is it by the IgE mediated, and effector cell is the basophil, eosinophil, and mast cell, especially in mast cell. Type 2 and type 3, I will skip on that. But type 4 is mediated by T cell. Okay, this is a cell-mediated immune response. Nowadays, type 4 divided into type 4A, B, C, and D. Okay, most of them is mediated by T cell, but the effector cell is different. For example, in type 4A, it's mediated by the macrophage or activated T cell. This is quite like the general type 4. Type 4B, the effector cell is eosinophil, and the cytokine mediated is type Th2 cytokine. Type 4C is mediated by cytotoxic T cell, and the last one, the type 4D, is mediated by a neutrophil. And the outcome of here of this type hypersensitivity, for example, in type 1, severe type 1 hypersensitivity is anaphylaxis that you already know that. But type 4 is quite various manifestation like rash, something like that, or it have a detachment of skin in case of Stevens-Johnson syndrome that you already know about that. Okay. The drug hypersensitivity is not just only mediated and have the occur in the skin, but it can occur in the liver. It can cause the hepatitis, or it can make the kidney damage that make the nephritis, or even in the lung. But most common that we found is it induced the dermatitis that we can see by eye and observe. So in case of non-severe, it's quite common for the drug allergy or the hypersensitivity like urticaria or the rash. But in case of the severe drug hypersensitivity like anaphylaxis or Stevens-Johnson or other severe drug adverse drug reaction, it can make a high mortality rate in the people that ever exposed to the drug. The problem is that is it possible to prevent susceptibles from severe drug hypersensitivity? As I mentioned earlier, that who is susceptible, which factor that it can define this is susceptible people. The second problem is once you obtain the drug and it can cause the hypersensitivity, in the same time you receive the many drugs in the same time, how can you define which one can cause the drug hypersensitivity? For sure, it's not always drug it can cause. Most common of the drug is one drug or two drugs, that's it. Okay, this is the problem that we obtain from the clinical part. So in the bench part or in the research, how can we define or how can we solve about this problem? The problem is one is the how to know about susceptible one. As you know that in case of the any process and presentation of the immune response that you already know that the drug it have to be processed and present, and the drug it may conjugate or attach to any protein and present by the MSC molecule. This is one part of the immune system that you already know that. And various of the MSC, it can make you susceptible to the drug. Okay, even the type 1 or any type, you have to pass through this process and presentation by MSC. Okay, it have the gene that you in everyone it have at least around 14 SLA or MSC allele in one people, and it have a variant in a human population that we have around nearly 10,000 SLA allele. It's shuffled in every people. It derived from your father and your mother. For example, in the people in the European, it have this pattern type of SLA, or in the Asian, it have this type of SLA. For the least people that have the gene like a SLA A3101, it is susceptible to have the carbamazepines drug hypersensitivity, especially in Stevenson. Also, SLA B5701 is susceptible to a bacteria, for example. However, this cannot apply into our area, like in the Asian population. In the Asian population, for the carbamazepine, we have to looking for SLA B1502. As well as in allopurinol, we have to seeking for SLA B5801. And for the physician that have to start the drug, for the people that need to receive the allopurinol on carbamazepine, in Thailand, we have to screen the people, not screen, sorry. We have to check whether they have this gene, this susceptible gene, before they prescribe the drug. Especially my colleague, rheumatologist, before he prescribed the drug for the allopurinol, they send the blood for checking of the SLA 5801. Anyhow, it doesn't mean that any people that have no SLA 5801 can be safely for the allopurinol. It have even in the rare, but it's some cases that is obtain allopurinol and it can cause a severe drug reaction. But this have the SLA-B, but it's quite derivative from 5801, something like that. But anyhow, once you screen here, at least it helps you or the physician to decide which people should be received about this drug, at least for the safety side of the patient. Okay, this is the one part that in vitro it can help you to save yourself and also save the people and save the patient. The second one is how can we identify the culprit that causes the hypersensitivity? The question is that before you're going to define this drug hypersensitivity, you have to think about two things. The first is, it is a drug allergy, and which drug it can cause the disease or it can cause the drug hypersensitivity. If the first one, you can define by history and the clinical manifestation and other factor information that it can help you to confirm that this is the drug allergy. Because you have to rule out everything out and you can say that this is a drug allergy. It have a many criteria to use, like a Naranjon criteria or what any criteria. It can help you to confirm this is a drug allergy. And when you confirm this is a drug allergy, you have to define which drug it can cause the drug hypersensitivity. Okay. The thing that you need to know is from medical record that you have to receive it. And investigation, it have the many investigation, it can help you, even the CBC or liver function test. And the investigation is specific investigation. Anyhow, if any test, it cannot tell you which drug, you can go to like the acceptable gold standard is the provocation test. But anyhow, the provocation test, it means that the patient have to expose the drug again, and it may have a chance to be the severe and admit into the ICU subunit. That is not safe for the patient. So the specific test like in vivo and in vitro, it may help and help you to identify the culprit drug before that. The guidelines from the ENDAR or the European Academy that they say that once you define the drug allergy, it have the two types, it's susceptible IgE type 1 or type 4. The type 1, you can use the in vivo test like a skin prick test or intradermal. But in any institute that have the in vitro test like a specific IgE or basophil activation test, it can help, and at least sometimes it can shortcut of the skin test and even shortcut of the provocation test. It means that if this test, it gives you the positive one, it defines the drug, okay? Likewise, in the type 4 hypersensitivity, if some institute that have the lymphocyte transformation test, it can help you to not go into the patch test or the provocation test, okay? For the immediate hypersensitivity, type 1 hypersensitivity, actually it have the many tests, but so far it have the test that is quite well known and is acceptable is the basophil activation test. This is test to like a mimic the situation in vitro, in vivo. That is, you have to stimulate the basophil in the blood with the susceptible or with the suspicious drug, and you can getting by flow cytometry to define the basophil population. And you have to see the activation marker, whether they got activated or not. And this is the principle of the basophil activation test. You can see this is the letting of the basophil. Once you add a suspicious drug and drug, it can cause the disease. It can activate the basophil and make the decannulation. And the marker that is the surrogate of the decannulation is the here CD203C and CD63. We use this both marker for the activation marker at least to mimic the decannulation process. And the characteristic of the basophil activation test is the ex vivo functional test. And it's the use a small amount of the blood, but it can quite quickly to test within 3 hours. And sensitivity is quite varied, but it depends on the drug and depend on the patient as well. Specificity is quite good to excellent, but the point of here, if the negative, if the result, if the test gives the negative result, we cannot rule out the culprit of this hypersensitivity. Maybe you have to do with the in vivo test or the provocation test finally. The sensitivity of the beta-lactam, for example, the sensitivity is around here, but you can see specificity is quite high. And the experience of the basophil activation test in Silda Hospital that we develop is in-house. We can test with the radio contrast medium, is quite common, neuromuscular blocking agent, antibiotics, and chlorhexidine that we publish many papers. In-house base is adjustable to priming with IL-3, and also we can keep more positive control. Actually, the basophil activation test is have the commercial available, but it have some limitation with that. So that's why we develop in vivo in-house basophil activation test. And our test can give higher sensitivity than basophil activation test kit, and also cheaper than basophil activation test kits. And the tendency of the in vitro test with basophil is coming here and may be replaced or at least to help for not for the food or the drug challenging or provocation test. And availability of the basophil activation test is apart from the drug allergy, it's also food allergy and chronic urticaria as well. We go to the last one is delayed time hypersensitivity test, and you know that it's a T cell mediated test, and the T cell respond after they activated. It have many readout system like the cytokine proliferation, something like that, but the proliferation, it can give you more specificity when compared to the other cytokine profile. In our lab, we ever investigate the cytokine profile compared to the proliferation test, but we found that the proliferation test is still give the more sensitivity and also specificity. And the thymidine incorporation is quite used for the proliferation test for a long period. The principle is that the more the cell proliferates, is the more the thymidine that they consume. And we also count the particle that's released from the thymidine is a beta particle. And we count
1 more minute.
Okay. So the test is a functional test as well, but it's also use a time consuming. Sensitivity is around 13 and 90, but it gives you the excellent specificity. Okay. And advantage is not harmful, and you can test you with many drugs at the same time. The disadvantage is that you need many equipment, people, time, and some is cannot tell you more sensitivity with some scar like Steven Johnson and Tan. And it can use for the drug hypersensitivity and the contact dermatitis. And this is our summarize it. Sensitivity is quite varied, but specificity is quite good and excellent to 100%. Also, we have to go into here and we try to tell you that we have a variable of the test, even the specific IgE, basophil activation test, and in our LTT in the SILAS hospital that we developed for nearly 10 years. The take-home message is a genetic investigation should be before the prescription of some certain drug, and it can help to prevent susceptible from the severe cutaneous drug reaction. In vitro test can use for reduce the risk and the burden for in vivo exposure for sensitized patient to identify the culprit drug. Anyhow, the excellent specificity, but mostly to good sensitivity of in vitro test. But the positive result, it can confirm the culprit drug, whereas the negative result, it cannot rule out the culprit drug, that you need more investigation to identify the culprit drug. Okay, this is my acknowledgement from the SILAS Hospital and Professor Picker from Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tan. Give an applause. So we move to the second speaker. Hello, Professor Yan Nawan. Hello. Hi, Yan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you clearly. Thank you so much. So this is the second speaker. I'm going to read the CV. Associate Professor Yan Nawan, he is an internist and associate professor in microbiology and infectious disease at Erasmus Medical Center, University Medical Center Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And his research focus in methicillin-resistant Staph aureus eradication, as well as HIV and tuberculosis in research poor settings. Professor Yan Nawan also very much involved in curriculum development and innovation and internationalization of educations. And currently, the main emphasis is on developing of a global network of research, education, and academic training. And today he will be sharing with us about the when two pandemics join forces. Sure, Yan, time is yours.
Okay, so I can share my screen, I guess.
Sure, sure.
Where is it? Oh, yeah, here. One moment. Okay, so do you see my presentation, Prisma?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation, and happy to be here to lecture about a topic which is at my heart, which is essentially antimicrobial resistance. The funny thing is that I accepted to lecture today for the University of Surabaya, thinking I would be in the Netherlands, but it turned out that I'm Kuala Lumpur right now. So not so much of a time difference, but it took some time to find a room to be able to present this to your seminar. So again, thank you very much. So as introduced, I'm Jan. I'm an internist infectious disease specialist, and the title of my lecture is "When Two Pandemics Join Forces," and I hope that that will become clear what I mean with that. Oh yeah. Okay, so of course we all just came out of this COVID-19 pandemic, and these are data from last week from WHO. I think they will be updated today with 750 million cases, about 7 million deaths during 3 years of this pandemic. And of course, that's the bad thing, 7 million deaths. But if you look at vaccines and vaccination doses administered, then 30 billion vaccine doses administered is, I think, some kind of a revolution that has taken place in the world. This is a graph from Our World in Data showing the numbers, daily numbers and daily deaths of COVID-19 globally. And you can clearly see that last year, so 1 year ago, we globally, at least, we were at the height of new infections, and then it suddenly went down again up till now. And of course, we've seen the first and second wave, very serious disease, and then thereafter, it luckily turned into a less severe disease with the Omicron variants occurring. As I said, we think we're out of this pandemic. But I think that before COVID already, and now especially after COVID, a new pandemic, which has been called a slow pandemic or silent pandemic, is looming. And that pandemic is antimicrobial resistance. Now, this is a slide out of the Lancet, I think already from 2015, when they produced a report or reported on a report commissioned by the UK government to look into the cost of antimicrobial resistance worldwide in 2050, because these are data, expected data in 2050, so 27 years from now. And as you can see, the numbers you see are the number of people dying from infections with resistant antimicrobial resistant organisms, bacteria mainly. And you see that in Asia and in Africa, more than 4 million people are expected to die on a yearly basis from infections caused by antimicrobial resistant bacteria. At the same study estimates that in total about 10 million people will die on a yearly basis from AMR, which is more than from any other cause of disease. And then you can think, is that bad? I think it is, because AMR threatens prevention and treatment of infections, not only bacteria, but also parasites, viruses, TB, of course, HIV, very important. AMR is a global public health threat across all sectors in society, and without effective antibiotics, I think we should be reminded that the major successes of surgery and cancer chemotherapy will be severely compromised. So we could not do what we do today without antibiotics. And at the same time, cost of healthcare for patients and for society will go up enormously with these increasing numbers of antimicrobial resistance. But this was 8 years ago, estimated to have 10 million people dying from antimicrobial resistance in 2015. This was a report from last year, where they measured the global burden of bacterial antimicrobial resistance in 2019, so just before COVID came around. And from their estimates, already in 2019, 5 million people worldwide were dying, or at least their death was associated with bacterial AMR, with 1.2 million people dying from bacterial AMR. So it's creeping on us, and so 5 million already now will mean that in the coming years that will increase enormously, and that this 10 million in 2050 is not something which is a figure in the far future, far away from us, but it is real life at the same moment. So I'm from Erasmus Medical Center, and the name giver of our university is Desiderius Erasmus, and one of his quotes, his famous quotes, is "Prevention is better than cure." And I think we learned a lot from COVID. Again, we learned that lockdowns work because you can decrease transmission and you can decrease the number of infections and thereby the number of deaths. We also learned that mouth masks work very elegantly, and that social distancing also works very nicely. And I think you all experienced that doing away with social distancing has led to an enormous increase in viral upper airway infections the last couple of months, like influenza, RSV, and others. So it really helps to prevent diseases. And of course, the other revolution, I think, in COVID times was the development of vaccines within a year after COVID came around. And it has, I think, been clearly shown that vaccines really work in containing this epidemic and containing the spread of COVID-19. So that about COVID. And then what about antimicrobial resistance? There is a global alliance for the prudent use of antibiotics, and I think prudent use of antibiotics is key in preventing the further spread of antimicrobial resistance. And again, prudent use of antibiotics has been proven to prevent AMR. Now, prudent use of antibiotics is not the only part of the tree of infection prevention and control as it is depicted here. Infection control is more than only antimicrobial resistant prevention. It's also prevention of the spread of antimicrobial resistant bacteria within hospitals, from patient to patient, or from patient to healthcare workers, or from healthcare workers to patients. So infection control, infection prevention is really key also in dealing with this pandemic of antimicrobial resistance. And you can do that only if there's quality improvement in patient safety, and if there's health system strengthening, and all these other branches of the infection prevention and control tree. But if you do that, again, it clearly works. So we know what to do. We know what we should do, I think. But the question is, are we doing that? So I'm from the Netherlands, and the Dutch doctors are known for being very restrictive in prescribing antibiotics. And as you can see here, this is from Europe. We are on the right, and Dutch doctors are prescribing the least amount of antibiotics per day per 1,000 inhabitants. On the left is Greece. So does that matter if you look at antimicrobial resistance? So yes, it does, because if, for instance, you look at MRSA prevalence and incidence, and this is from the ECDC database, you can clearly see that Holland is here, is very green and has less than 1% resistant MRSA. Causing infections. And if you look at Greece, which was on the left side, the Greek doctors prescribing the most antibiotics in Europe, you see that 25 to 50%, and in Bulgaria even more than 50% of Staph aureus isolates recovered from patients are resistant, are MRSA. So yes, being restrictive in prescribing antibiotics works, helps, prevents the spread of antimicrobial resistance. Now back to the article in the Lancet of last year, where they were monitoring the AMR in bacteria in 2019. If you look at what kind of diseases, what kind of infections globally account for deaths associated with antimicrobial resistance or attributable to associated to bacterial antimicrobial resistance, you see that it is mainly lower respiratory tract infections, but also bloodstream infections, intra-abdominal infections, and then it becomes less. But if you look at the numbers, it's immense. And I said already, total number of deaths associated with bacterial antimicrobial resistance is up to 5 billion. If you look at from a bacteria point of view, then you will see that the most prevalent resistance in antimicrobial resistance is in E. coli, causing about 800,000 deaths associated at least with resistance. Staph aureus, MRSA, top 2, Klebsiella, top 3, and then pneumococci and fourth, and Acinetobacter and Pseudomonas following after that. And I think that everyone would know from his or her own practice that these really are the 5 bacteria you will encounter resistant with. If you look at the burden of antimicrobial resistance, I showed it in a slide earlier on as already that the main burden would be in Asia, and in sub-Saharan Africa. Also, this study confirms that the majority of deaths associated with antimicrobial resistance would be in sub-Saharan Africa. And then South Asia, and then Eastern Europe, and then Latin America, and then the more richer the country is, the less deaths from antimicrobial resistance you will see. That is not to say that there is no antimicrobial resistance, but I think it's more that there's access to other newer antibiotics to treat these patients with these antimicrobial resistant bacteria. So the world is not equal, and that's of course what we know of earlier on as well. Vaccine coverage has been very slow in sub-Saharan Africa because all the Western countries bought up all the vaccines available from Pfizer, Moderna, and the other companies. The other thing from this article is that the pattern of antimicrobial resistance and the bacteria causing infections in patients is different per part of the world. So the colors reflect the different bacteria. And so blue here is E. coli, red is Klebsiella, orange is Staph aureus. And you see that this is Central Europe, Eastern Europe, this is high income, this is Latin America, this is North Africa, Middle East, and then Southeast Asia, etc., and Sub-Saharan Africa. You see that the pattern is different globally. So it means also that one solution fits all solution will not be there. You need to recognize that the epidemic or the pandemic of antimicrobial resistance is different per continent, different per country, different if a country is a high income or low income country, and you need to take that into account in your measures to prevent the spread of antimicrobial resistance and treat patients with antimicrobial resistant infections. And to put in a scary slide, this is a slide showing Klebsiella pneumonia resistant to 3rd generation cephalosporins, one of the groups of drugs mostly used in the world. And you can see that so dark red is more than 80%. And you can see that in the Soviet Union, or in Russia, sorry, more than 80% of Klebsiella are resistant against 3rd generation cephalosporins. But you can also see that in many other countries over the world, it's above 60 or even above 70%. Again, we are lucky to be in a position in Europe that has not been so much of a problem so far, except we see this kind of problems incidentally. But of course, like with COVID, bacteria do not know borders, so they will travel and we will encounter these resistant microorganisms anyway. And for instance, with refugees from Syria early on, and now refugees from Ukraine entering Europe and also entering the Netherlands, you see patients with these pen-resistant microorganisms with very difficult to treat infection, or perhaps sometimes even unable to treat infections with antimicrobial resistant microorganisms. So what can we do? I said already, so we know really what to know. We know what works. We know that infection prevention and control is key. And we also know that if you have a sore throat and if you have a viral infection, you should not use antibiotics. That's something which is very clear. What's very clear as well is that antibiotics do not work on COVID-19, of course. But what happened during the COVID pandemic, of course, is that many people were admitted to the hospital, and very many people were admitted to the ICU, and very many people also in the Netherlands were treated with antibiotics anyway, despite them having COVID-19 because of presumed bacterial infection or superinfection, or because you didn't know the diagnosis at that moment. So there has been a huge overuse of antibiotics during COVID years. And I think that this overuse of antibiotics worldwide will lead to even more increased antimicrobial resistance and will even further deteriorate the antimicrobial resistant pandemic in the world. So going from 5 million deaths in 2019, I'm really curious if they did the same exercise this year in 23, if this 5 million would not be 7 or 8 million in the meantime because of the increased antimicrobial resistant problem due to the COVID pandemic. So to conclude, so this is again from the article I mentioned. AMR is the leading cause of death around the world with the highest burden in low resource settings. And the key to combating this problem is understanding that we have this burden of AMR, and that it is key to make informed location-specific decisions that strengthening infection prevention and control programs in countries, having better access also from low-income countries to new and essential antibiotics to treat patients with AMR, to develop new vaccines and new antibiotics. But as you probably also know, the antibiotic pipeline is very limited at the moment. And we should see from this article, I guess, that there are serious gaps, specifically data gaps in many low-income settings, making it key that microbiology laboratory capacity is expanded and the data collection is expanded to improve our understanding of AMR in low-income settings as well. So I hope I made my title clear that COVID-19 antimicrobial resistance, so it's dual health threat and one works against the other. So COVID-19 certainly has deteriorated the antimicrobial resistant pandemic. And as said, so this was the scary slide from 2019, but I'm very curious how this will be in 2022 or even now in 2023. So again, prevention is better than cure. Vaccines work, prudent antibiotic use works, infection prevention and control works. Not every infection needs antibiotics. And I think that adequate microbiology diagnostics and consultation are key to understanding this pandemic, but also to combat this pandemic in a joint effort. So, and to stress once again, antibiotics don't work against COVID and don't work against viruses. So be restrictive with your antibiotic use. And so this is a quote really from Bill Gates. Bill Gates has a very nice TED talk from 2015 or 2016, just after the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. And he uses Ebola as an example. And the title of his presentation is "We Are Not Ready for the Next Pandemic." And that was in 2015. He was very correct when we've seen this COVID-19 pandemic the last 3 years. And I think that, again, you could say that we're not ready for this next pandemic, this silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance. And we should start working on it before people are dying. And healthcare will become very problematic in the near future. So thank you for your attention. And if there are questions, I will be ready to take them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Yang. So this is to me actually a quite for my personal thing, yeah, for the AMR. When I was a student, as PhD student in Netherlands, my work also with the MRSI. So it's like a deja vu actually. So we are now to the Q&A sessions, and I would like to invite some of the student, the audience. Okay.
Hello, Prof. Yutana. My name is Jeffman. I'm clinical pharmacologist in Indonesia. I'm actually stressing specialist in drug safety in the health services. I have concerns about, I'm really passionate about drug allergy, especially the labeling drug allergy, which is part of antimicrobial stewardship. But unfortunately, in Indonesia, we don't implement the labeling drug allergy yet. I think one of the problem is because of lack of awareness. In the other hand, in my opinion, one of the problem is over-labeling of drug allergy to the patient, like penicillin allergy or beta-lactam allergy. My question is, how you determine which patient will be tested with the in vitro test, like lymphocyte transformation test or ELISpot maybe? And do you have any stratification for this patient? Do you maybe use something stratification like PANFAS or something like that? That's the first questions. The second question is, I really interested about, you said earlier about patch test. Would you please explain about patch test did you done in your centers? Or maybe you can share about what patch test that you have done in your centers like that, and how much the concentration of the drug that you use to the patch test. I think this is one of problem of patch test about the drug allergy in the world. Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay, we know that not every institute it can provide the in vitro test or even in vivo test. That is one problem. Actually, as you are the penicillin or beta-lactam, we quite use a lot. Even sometimes you can buy in the counter of the pharmacy, something like that. But anyhow, we have to give the education for even the physician and the people that do not use antibiotics with without the prescription. Even though we will be enforced with the drug hypersensitivity as well as the antimicrobial drugs resistant. This is quite problem. The thing that in case that we some situation that we have no any test, we have to sure that this is the case of the drug hypersensitivity first. Okay, we have actually there are many algorithms to help you, even knowledge criteria, some criteria from WHO, from criteria from British consultant society of the immunology, that it can help you to scope to narrow down which drug it should be cause of the drug hypersensitivity, as well as it have the many information or statistical data of which drug it can cause the severe drug hypersensitivity, that it may help you to narrow down of the which is the culprit drug. For the testing, it's just a part to help, but it's not the whole thing that it can identify the culprit drug. Sometimes you can identify from the history of the patient or even the algorithm. But in case of the test, extra with the in vitro test, it may not easy. But allergists, it may help you with some skin quick test or intradermal test if they are available. Some institutes can prepare for provocation, but anyhow you have to prepare a lot of equipment for the provocation test. The second question on the PAT test. PAT test is is actually now there are no actually there is no consensus the protocol, but it had a mini protocol from European Academy, EASCRE, you can see before. It have the publication that is launched by this group, and they recommend which drug with solvent like pitolatum or some other that it can solvent can dilute or solve the drug and pass into the skin. The concentration, I think that they also give to in many publications that it can tell you which drug it can use with the concentration of the drug it can proper for the patch test that you can see that you can find it in the publication. In Silas Hospital, we have the clinic for the patch test in the department of dermatology that the dermatologists perform about this to patch test with us. I think I can answer your question.
Yeah, Dr. Chapman. Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you, Professor Yutana. I have one question for Professor Yanawan. When you show us the graph about the death rate due to the AMR, the antibiotic, the AMR, especially for the age is pretty high, and for us it's actually quite scary. And I think, yeah, so many factors actually contribute to that number. There's policy and how easy actually for us to get an access to the antibiotics. So I know that for a long time ago, but now it's much better than before. And plus, due to the COVID, the COVID pandemics, maybe those problems become less noticed or neglected. And then since we have I think it's around 200 students, the medical students here in the room, listening to this webinar. What is your main message to the future doctors here that maybe they can learn about the use of the antibiotics that actually are very important?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Risma. So I think there are a couple of points. One is that as a doctor, you think twice before you prescribe antibiotics. And I said that you don't prescribe antibiotics for simple viral infections. That's not what you should do. I think Professor Yutana also very clearly said that, but that's more policy, that antibiotics should not be available over the counter without prescription. That's policy that you can do as a country, and you should do as a country, I think. And the other thing is that I think that future doctors, and that's a little bit how we work in the Netherlands, but that future doctors should give up some of their independence, should give up some of their way of being able to decide themselves what to do for a patient and what not. And what I mean by that is that there are guidelines for antimicrobial prescription, and you should stick to the guidelines. And as a institute, as a hospital, but also as a country, you should make doctors follow these guidelines and make them do that. So what happens in the Netherlands, for instance, is there's a yearly surveillance on antimicrobial prescription and on antimicrobial resistance. And what is being scored is that if how high the non-prudent use of antibiotics in your hospital and at your departments within the hospital is. So it's a little bit of shame blaming, but that's something that works. So no department, no doctor, no department head will like it to be in the top 1 or top 3 of the hospital prescribing the most non-prudent use of antibiotics. So using antibiotics which are not indicated, using the wrong antibiotics, using the wrong route. So there should be a stimulus for doctors to stick to the guidelines, and you should hold them accountable for that. And that's what I mean, that if there's a clinical microbiologist or an infectious disease specialist or someone who has experience with antimicrobial prescriptions and antibiotics, that you could be corrected by this infectious disease specialist in the use of antibiotics, and that he or she could make you change the choice of antibiotics or stop antibiotics even. So that's what I mean by giving up some of your independence as a doctor. You are being followed. So Big Brother is watching you, and you should get used to that. But for the better good of patient and patient care. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Jan. Actually, we still have so many questions here from the students. Maybe one more. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
There.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I have a question directed to Associate Professor Jan Nguyen, MD, PhD. My question is that antimicrobial resistance is a serious issue in current times, and scientists are constantly developing newer antibiotics in an effort to combat current microbes and bacteria. Preventive is better than cure, although unfortunately it seems that AMR is currently attempting to catch up to us, and antibiotic resistance is already pretty high. My question is there an effort to reverse antibiotic resistance, perhaps through manipulation or research on the host genes or maybe on the bacteria's genes? Is it possible to come to a point where antibiotic resistance will be reversible? Or is it a field where antibiotics have to be constantly developed to keep up with the current antibiotic resistance rates? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the question. I think one is that there are not so much antibiotics being developed. So the pipeline has been nearly empty for many years. And I think now only pharmaceutical industry sees the relevance are getting back into development of antibiotics. So there's not so much to expect from the very near future. The antibiotics which are framed as new antibiotics are really tweaks of older antibiotics or beta-lactam, beta-lactamase combinations in a different way than we've seen before. So, but really novel antibiotics, they are very rare at the moment, sadly. On the other hand, if we continue to use antimicrobials as candy, you will see a very quick emergence to these new antibiotics as well. So what works is, again, stop overusing antibiotics. And if you stop overusing antibiotics, you will see that your antimicrobial resistance problem within your hospital will become less. And that's really where we should focus on. Now, the other thing I would like to point out is that there's two developments or three developments perhaps. So one is antimicrobial peptides being used to combat, which is different from antimicrobials, to combat infections. But these are very challenging. And as with antibiotics, also against antimicrobial peptides, bacteria can develop resistance. And the other thing is bacteriophages, which of course have been used for long in the former Soviet Union. Iliava Institute in Georgia has become famous for the development of bacteriophages. But so far, there has not been a randomized clinical trial showing the effectiveness of bacteriophages. There's case reports which hint to potential use of bacteriophages, and in Erasmus, but that also counts for other centers within Europe. centers for the use of bacteriophages in complex infectious diseases are being set up. So one use of bacteriophages in combination with antibiotics could be that bacteriophages are capable of reversing antimicrobial resistance within bacteria. And the main way they do that is that they can attack the biofilm because most of the infections we talk about are biofilm-related infections, and they can attack and destroy the biofilms, making the bacteria accessible for the antibiotics you use, and thereby making the infection treatable again. But you also see sometimes reversal of antimicrobial resistance of the bacteria themselves by the use of bacteriophages. If that's going to work in future, that has to be shown in randomized controlled trials, and that is very challenging in the bacteriophage world to really do that. But that's work in progress. But don't expect that will solve the problem in 1 or 2 years. No way. So also for bacteriophages, bacteria can become resistant because phages have been there for billions of years. Bacteria have been there for billions of years, and it's a rat race between the phages and the bacteria, and both are still here. So bacteria are very elusive to develop these kind of resistant patterns also against phages.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. So due to our limited time, I would like to conclude our the second session of this webinar. So the first one is that actually the genetic investigation before prescribing drugs will helps a lot to prevent the negative results. And at the end, we're going to the direction of personalized medicine. That's the ideal. And the second one, the antimicrobial resistance is actually very real problem. And it seems that the battle of the AMR is not finished yet. But then what we have to remember that the infection control is the key. So thank you very much for all the speakers and all the participants, the online and offline, for your time. And I believe that all the insight that we've gained today are very valuable and inspiring for all of us. And for this time, I will give the mic back to Pak Adi.
Okay, thank you. How are you, John? Nice to meet you again. How are you, Dr. Yutana?
Nice.
Glad to know you. Okay, now we come to the conclusion of our webinar. But as the moderator said, then we will do a group photo for those who are at Zoom. While for those who are here, we will do separately later, I think. You can. Okay, Sandra, would you mind to comment us as the previous for taking the screenshot with the two speakers, Dr. Yan and also Dr. Yutana, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
surely do, Bapak. Please allow me to take a picture of you guys for the second sessions. I'll take the pictures from the first page first. In 1, 2, 3. And it is fine if you want to turn your camera on by now. I will wait. Okay, I'll take a picture on the second page. 1, 2, 3, and last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yan. Thank you, Prof. Yutana. Bye-bye. See you all. Yang di sini, ayo foto di depan katanya Dr. Ika. Ayo Prof, ikut Prof.